Have you ever had one of those days where everything seems to go wrong? The kind of day where a simple mistake spirals into a series of unfortunate events? Well, that's exactly what happened to Sarah. She had ordered a meal, but due to a mix-up, she needed to cancel it. What she didn't anticipate was that this small decision would lead to a series of events that would change her life forever. Storytime.life. Hindustan Times. It all started with a phone call. Sarah had just returned home after a long day at work, feeling exhausted and looking forward to a quiet evening. She had ordered dinner online, but as she was about to settle in, she realized she had made a mistake with the order. Without thinking much of it, she decided to cancel it. Little did she know, this seemingly insignificant action would set off a chain of events that would alter her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. The delivery guy, Mark, had been working tirelessly that evening, delivering meals across the city. When he received the cancellation notice, he was already on his way to Sarah's address. Frustrated but understanding, he decided to complete the delivery anyway, thinking it might be a misunderstanding. Upon arrival, he was met with Sarah's surprise and confusion. She explained the situation, and they shared a brief, awkward moment. However, as Mark was about to leave, he noticed something that made him pause. Sarah had a stack of unopened letters on her table, all marked with urgent notices. Curious and concerned, Mark inquired about them. Sarah hesitated but eventually opened up. She was facing financial difficulties and had been ignoring the bills, hoping they would go away. Mark, sensing her distress, offered a few words of encouragement and left, but not without leaving a lasting impression on Sarah. Legit.ng, Nigeria News. +5. Storytime.life. +5. People.com. +5. The next day, Sarah received an unexpected message from Mark. He had taken the time to research local resources and provided her with information about financial assistance programs. Touched by his kindness, Sarah decided to take action. She reached out to the programs Mark had suggested and began the process of addressing her financial issues. With time, effort, and support, Sarah managed to regain control of her finances and improve her situation. But the story doesn't end there. Mark's simple act of kindness had a ripple effect. Inspired by his compassion, Sarah decided to pay it forward. She started volunteering at local shelters, helping others who were in situations similar to hers. Through her volunteer work, she met new people, formed meaningful connections, and found a sense of purpose. As Sarah's life transformed, she kept in touch with Mark. They shared stories, supported each other's endeavors, and developed a deep friendship. Eventually, that friendship blossomed into something more. They realized they had found in each other not just a friend, but a partner. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day, built on a foundation of mutual respect, kindness, and understanding. Storytime.life. Looking back, Sarah often reflects on that fateful evening when she tried to cancel her order. What seemed like a minor inconvenience turned out to be the catalyst for a series of events that led her to a better life. She learned that sometimes, the smallest actions can have the most profound impacts. And that kindness, even from a stranger, can change the course of someone's life. So, the next time you're faced with a situation that seems insignificant, remember Sarah's story. You never know how your actions might affect someone else's life. A simple act of kindness could be the spark that ignites a positive change. And as for Sarah and Mark, their story is a testament to the power of human connection and the unexpected ways life can surprise us. Sometimes, all it takes is a small decision to set in motion a chain of events that leads to something beautiful. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about how small acts of kindness can change lives, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to light. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll share another heartwarming tale of unexpected kindness and its ripple effects. Until then, remember, kindness is free, and it can change the world. Sources. Sarah had always been a creature of habit. Her life, though modest, was predictable, perhaps even a bit too predictable. She woke up at 6:30 every morning, brewed her coffee just the way she liked it, and commuted to her job at the local marketing firm. Evenings were spent in the comfort of her apartment, often with a takeout meal and a true crime documentary to unwind. But recently, that routine had begun to feel like a cage. The bills had started piling up. A missed payment here, a forgotten subscription there, and before she knew it, her credit card was maxed out. Sarah had always been responsible, she prided herself on it, but now, she found herself avoiding phone calls and unopened letters that seemed to multiply overnight. She told herself it was just a phase, that things would get better. But deep down, she knew she was teetering on the edge of something much darker. Her friends noticed the change. They hadn't seen her smile the way she used to, hadn't heard her laugh with the same ease. They chalked it up to stress, to the demands of her job, to the weight of adult responsibilities. But Sarah knew it was more than that. She was unraveling, and she didn't know how to stop it. Then came the day she decided to cancel the order. It was supposed to be a simple decision, just a quick tap on her phone, a momentary inconvenience. But when the delivery guy showed up anyway, it felt like fate had intervened. He was just a stranger, a faceless name on an app. Yet, in that brief interaction, he saw her. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the hesitation in her voice. And for reasons she couldn't explain, he chose to stay. Mark, the delivery guy, had his own burdens. He wasn't a superhero or a therapist, he was just a man trying to make ends meet. But something about Sarah's vulnerability struck a chord with him. He didn't have much to offer, just a few words of encouragement, a suggestion to seek help. Yet, those words planted a seed in Sarah's mind, one that began to grow in the days that followed. But as Sarah took tentative steps toward reclaiming control of her life, shadows from her past began to resurface. A former colleague reached out, offering a job opportunity that seemed too good to be true. An old friend reappeared, rekindling a connection that had long been dormant. Each encounter brought with it a sense of unease, a feeling that things were not as they seemed. Was the job offer genuine, or was it a trap set by someone with ulterior motives? Could the rekindled friendship be a coincidence, or was there a hidden agenda at play? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that every move she made was being scrutinized. And then there was Mark. His kindness had been a lifeline, but now, Sarah wondered if there was more to him than met the eye. Was he truly a stranger offering help, or was he somehow connected to the web of mysteries unfolding around her? As the days passed, Sarah found herself entangled in a labyrinth of questions and doubts. Each answer seemed to lead to more questions, each revelation more perplexing than the last. Sarah's mind raced, connecting dots, forming theories, discarding them just as quickly. Each answer led to more questions, each revelation more perplexing than the last. The deeper Sarah dug, the more she realized that the conspiracy was far-reaching, its tendrils woven into every aspect of her life. The delivery guy, Emily's disappearance, the cryptic messages, they were all part of a larger scheme, a game played by unseen hands. But who was pulling the strings? And why? As the days passed, Sarah began to feel the weight of paranoia pressing down on her. She couldn't trust anyone, not her colleagues, not her neighbors, not even her own family. Everyone was a potential threat, a possible ally, a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. And then, just when she thought she had reached the end of the line, she received another message: "You're closer than you think. But you're not the only one looking." The words were a taunt, a challenge, a warning. Someone else was out there, someone else was searching for the truth, and they were just as determined as Sarah to find it. The stakes had never been higher. The danger had never been more real. And Sarah was running out of time. But she couldn't stop now. Not when Emily was still missing. Not when the truth was so close, yet so elusive. Not when the shadows were closing in, and the game was far from over. Stay tuned, because the next chapter will reveal the true extent of the conspiracy, and the shocking identity of the mastermind behind it all. You won't believe who it is. It all began to unravel on a cold Thursday evening, the kind where the streets feel too quiet and the night presses in too heavily. Sarah had just left a local coffee shop where she had gone hoping to clear her mind, maybe even stumble upon anything that would connect the fragments she'd been collecting. As she crossed the dimly lit parking lot, a sense of unease crept in, one she couldn't quite place. It wasn't the wind or the echo of her own footsteps. It was the silence, the unnatural kind that comes when someone is watching you but trying too hard not to be seen. She glanced over her shoulder, pretending to fumble with her phone, but nothing looked out of place. Still, her instincts screamed that something was wrong. And when she unlocked her car door and looked in the rearview mirror, she could have sworn she saw a figure duck behind a lamppost. That was the first time she truly felt afraid. The fear didn't fade when she got home, it deepened. Her apartment no longer felt like a safe place. There were tiny signs that something had been moved, not ransacked, but just enough to send a message. A framed photo on the counter was slightly crooked, a pair of earrings she never left out were now on the nightstand, and the spare phone she kept hidden in her sock drawer was gone. Someone had been there, and they wanted her to know it. She tried to call the police again, but as soon as she pressed dial, her phone screen flickered and went black. When it finally restarted, her entire call history had been wiped. Every text, every contact, gone. The only thing left was a single message sitting in her inbox, from a blocked number: "Stop asking questions. You're not ready for the answers." That night, Sarah barely slept. Her mind raced with thoughts that felt too outlandish to be real, but the evidence was all around her. She tried to convince herself it was all paranoia, that she was just spiraling. But then, the final blow came the next morning. She showed up at her office only to find that her security badge no longer worked. Her desk was empty, her computer gone, and HR told her, with forced smiles and clipped tones, that her position had been terminated due to a restructuring. No warning, no severance. Just like that, her professional identity had been erased. She checked her email and found nothing, not even her personal Gmail account would load. It was as if she had been digitally wiped off the map. With her job gone, her phone compromised, and her apartment no longer safe, Sarah had no one left to turn to. Her family was states away and barely spoke to her since the falling out over a past relationship. The one person she thought she could trust, Emily, was missing, and the journal she'd found had pages that suddenly made no sense. Names that once appeared clearly were now smudged or crossed out. Dates that were once organized were jumbled. It was as if someone had gone through the journal and deliberately altered the information. But why? What were they trying to hide or mislead her into believing? Her paranoia began to take a toll. Every stranger on the street looked like a potential tale. Every parked car might contain someone listening in. The hum of a nearby streetlight seemed too irregular, almost like coded signals. Her sense of reality thinned with each passing hour. Yet through the chaos and fear, a stubborn clarity grew in her. This was no longer about unraveling a mystery for curiosity's sake. This was about survival. Someone was trying to erase her, and unless she figured out who and why, they might actually succeed. Late that night, desperate and shaken, Sarah remembered a storage unit she had rented years ago after moving apartments. She hadn't visited it in ages, but maybe, just maybe, it still held something useful. Old records, an untouched laptop, maybe even notes from her early workdays that could hold a lead. But when she got there, heart pounding and flashlight in hand, she found the lock already broken, the door slightly ajar. Everything inside had been disturbed. Boxes torn open, papers shredded, and the one laptop she thought she had hidden behind a stack of books gone. On the wall, scrawled in what looked like red marker, were just 3 words: "You were warned." This was no coincidence. No longer just a digital threat or vague intimidation, this was physical, tangible, and terrifyingly close. Someone was playing a game with her life and clearly had access to parts of her world she thought were unreachable. It made her question everything. Was Emily's journal even real, or was it a carefully crafted breadcrumb trail designed to lead her into a trap? Was Mark just a pawn in a larger organization, or was he orchestrating all of this from the shadows? And more disturbingly, who else was involved? Was there someone even closer to her, someone she hadn't even suspected yet? The deeper she went, the more she realized that the answers she was chasing might not be the ones she needed, but the ones someone else wanted her to find. And now, the question she couldn't get out of her head wasn't what happens next, but what if this all started long before she ever tried to cancel that order? And just when she thought she had reached the bottom of the spiral, her apartment buzzer rang at 3:14 a.m. No delivery, no visitor expected. Just a single buzz, and silence. The real terror had only just begun, The buzzer's echo still hung in the air like a warning when Sarah approached the intercom with hesitant, trembling fingers. She didn't say anything, she just listened. Static. Then a low crackle, followed by a voice so familiar it made her knees buckle. It was Emily. Her voice was shaky, rushed, like she was speaking through clenched teeth. Don't trust the story you've been told. You've been watching the wrong side of the screen. Then silence. Not even a click. Just dead air. Sarah stood frozen for what felt like minutes, trying to process what she had just heard. Emily was alive. But more than that, Emily was trying to say that everything Sarah believed up until now was wrong. In the days that followed, Sarah became consumed with unraveling what Emily had meant. Her message didn't make sense, wrong side of the screen. It sounded metaphorical, like something out of a movie. But the more Sarah thought about it, the more it started to click. What if the mystery hadn't been something she stumbled into, but something that was constructed around her? Every clue she found, every lead she followed, every person she lost trust in, it had all felt orchestrated, like someone was 2 steps ahead, leading her toward conclusions they wanted her to make. But who had that kind of control? Digging through an old external hard drive, one of the few devices she hadn't connected to the internet in years, Sarah found archived footage from her days working at the marketing firm. It had been a massive account they were handling at the time, a digital campaign for a new facial recognition software being piloted by a private security firm. The client had been elusive, always communicating through intermediaries. The product itself kept under layers of NDAs and encrypted briefs. But there was one file, deeply buried, misnamed, that contained a test run of the software. It showed a live feed of street cameras across the city, but instead of highlighting threats or security breaches, it was tracking specific individuals. And one of them was her. That was the moment everything broke wide open. Sarah hadn't stumbled onto a criminal scheme or an identity theft ring. She had been part of a beta test, an unwitting subject in a real-world experiment on surveillance and psychological manipulation. The delivery guy, the suspicious job offer, the friend's disappearance, it was all staged. Carefully constructed scenarios designed to monitor her reactions, choices, vulnerabilities. The app she had used to order food wasn't just delivering meals, it had been collecting behavioral data. Her decision to cancel wasn't random. It had triggered a planned sequence designed to study how individuals respond under increasing stress and deception. The most jarring revelation came when she finally confronted Mark again. She tracked him down using a combination of security camera leaks and a fake job listing she posted herself. He met her in a crowded park, visibly shaken, but less like someone hiding and more like someone waiting to be caught. He didn't deny any of it. In fact, he confessed he had been hired to be part of the experiment, playing a role, following a script. But he claimed something had gone wrong. The people running the test had stopped contacting him. Payments stopped. Instructions vanished. He tried to back out, but the more he resisted, the more threats he received. He was just as trapped as she was. Or so he said. But that's when Sarah noticed something she hadn't before. Mark's phone. It had a cracked case, but beneath it was a logo barely visible, worn down but unmistakable. The same logo that had appeared on one of the confidential files from her firm's project years ago. It was no coincidence. He wasn't just a pawn. He was part of the original team. He hadn't been hired to play a role. He was one of the architects of the entire experiment. Everything he told her, the sympathetic delivery guy, the rogue actor, the victim like her, it was all part of a longer con. And if he was still playing a role, then Emily's message wasn't just a warning. It was a test to see if Sarah would finally start looking beyond the narrative they had fed her. She walked away from Mark without saying a word. Her mind was spinning, heart pounding, but one thing was now crystal clear. The story she thought she was living in of chance encounters, mysterious threats, and buried secrets was actually a controlled illusion. And the people she thought were helping her were actually pulling strings from behind a curtain she had just begun to lift. But why her? Why this level of manipulation? Sarah didn't know the answer yet, but she could feel it looming. Somewhere, there was a room full of people watching her, tracking her every move, analyzing her fear, her resilience, her unraveling mind. And what terrified her most was not what they wanted to learn, but what they already knew. Because if everything had been a test, then the real experiment hadn't even started. And she wasn't the only subject. It had been 3 days since Sarah walked away from Mark in the park, and since then, she had barely eaten, barely slept, her entire existence warped into a loop of searching, watching, and second-guessing everything around her. The deeper she fell into this orchestrated nightmare, the more it seemed that every choice she made had been anticipated, every instinct manipulated. The city she once navigated with ease now felt foreign, like a stage where the set pieces could shift at any moment and the cast was reading lines she never received. And just when she thought she might finally catch her breath, the next blow came not from an enemy, but from someone she had trusted all her life. Her older brother, Jacob, was the one person who had always stood by her, even after their parents died, even when Sarah spiraled into self-doubt or pushed people away. He had helped pay her college tuition, talked her through breakups, picked her up from too many places when she was too drained to move. He was family, the last solid piece of her foundation. And yet, when she noticed an email flagged in her old encrypted account, a server she thought had been offline for years, it was from him. The message wasn't sentimental. It wasn't even emotional. It was instructions. Coordinates. Times. Encrypted file attachments. And a chilling closing line that shifted the ground beneath her again. They're watching both of us now. You still have time to walk away. She confronted him that night. She didn't storm in or scream. She just stood in the doorway of his apartment, exhausted and numb, holding up her phone with the email open, and asked him to tell her the truth. At first, he denied everything. He said he had no idea what she was talking about, that maybe someone had spoofed his address. But when she said the word experiment and described the surveillance footage, his face drained of all color. His silence gave her the answer before he spoke. Jacob hadn't just known about the program, he had been part of the oversight committee. Years ago, after leaving the military, he had joined a private security consultancy that specialized in behavioral prediction. Their core belief was that fear, not control, revealed the truest parts of a person. And Sarah, whether by design or accident, had been one of their long-term subjects. It was supposed to be a short psychological stress trial, a simulation to evaluate decision-making under covert observation. But something changed. The data they got from Sarah wasn't just useful, it was exceptional. Her behavior, her choices, her ability to adapt under pressure had made her the centerpiece of a case study that kept expanding. Every person she trusted, every moment of confusion, every breadcrumb had been tracked, catalogued, and analyzed in real time. What started as a trial had evolved into a full-scale behavioral prototype. Jacob claimed he had tried to pull out, but they had leverage. Not just financial, personal. Deep, dangerous things that could ruin him and her if exposed. The ultimatum came the next morning. A package arrived at Sarah's door with no return address, just a USB drive and a burner phone. On the drive was a video, Sarah, sitting in a therapy session from years ago. A session she barely remembered, recorded illegally. The footage showed her confessing things she never wanted anyone to hear about a time she contemplated ending her life, about guilt she carried over a friend's overdose, about the voice she sometimes still heard in her head when she was too tired to fight it off. It was raw and real and devastating. The phone rang before the video ended. A distorted voice told her she had two options. She could agree to participate willingly, sign a consent form, allow the experiment to conclude with her cooperation, and everything would disappear. No more surveillance, no more manipulation, no more leaks. Or, she could walk away, go public, and risk those recordings being released, along with every bit of confidential data they had collected, her emails, her search history, her private messages, even the unfiltered transcripts of her therapy AI app. The voice warned that once that door opened, she'd never be able to close it again. It was the kind of choice that left no real path forward. Stay silent and protect herself, but live with the knowledge that everything she had been through would go unpunished. Or fight back, expose the truth, and risk her own life being shattered in the process. As she sat in her darkened apartment, holding the burner phone in one hand and the USB drive in the other, Sarah finally let herself feel it all: grief, anger, betrayal, fear. She realized the most horrifying part wasn't that she had been watched. It was that at some point, she had started to doubt her own mind. They had taken everything, and in the spaces between facts and manipulation, they had made her question whether she even knew who she really was anymore. But deep beneath the panic and heartbreak, something else started to rise, something quiet but resolute. This wasn't just about her anymore. There were others. If they had done it to her, they could do it again. She couldn't save Emily. She couldn't undo what Jacob had helped build. But she could still make a choice. Just not the one they thought she would. Not yet. Not until she had answers that would shake the entire foundation of what they believed they controlled. And as she reached for the laptop she hadn't turned on in weeks, the one with her old credentials from the marketing firm, she noticed something she hadn't before. Buried deep in the code of the last facial recognition file she'd viewed, there was a name embedded in the metadata. A name that didn't belong to her, Mark, Emily, or Jacob. A name she hadn't heard in years. Her mother's. The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah like a physical force, each breath a struggle against the suffocating realization that her life had been a carefully constructed illusion. The email from her brother, Jacob, had shattered the fragile semblance of control she'd clung to. She had thought she was uncovering a conspiracy, peeling back layers of deceit, but now it seemed she was merely a pawn in a game far larger and more insidious than she could have imagined. The video on the USB drive had been the final blow. The footage from her therapy session, raw and unfiltered, laid bare her deepest vulnerabilities. The distorted voice on the phone had offered her a choice: comply with their demands and end the experiment, or resist and face the consequences. The threat was clear, the stakes impossibly high. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to navigate the world on her terms. But now, she was being forced to choose between her safety and the truth. As she sat in her apartment, the walls closing in around her, Sarah's mind raced. She had trusted Jacob, trusted him implicitly. He had been her rock, her anchor in a world that often felt unmoored. But now, she saw him for what he truly was: a cog in a machine designed to manipulate and control. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have anticipated. She had always believed that family was sacred, that blood was thicker than water. But now, she questioned everything she had ever known. The phone rang again, its shrill tone slicing through the silence. Sarah hesitated before answering, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "You know what you have to do," it said. "Time is running out." She slammed the phone down, her hands trembling. The walls seemed to close in even tighter, the air thick with the weight of impending doom. She had no allies, no safe harbor. Everyone she had trusted had been complicit in this grand deception. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was the truth. She was alone. The days blurred together in a haze of fear and uncertainty. Sarah's every move felt monitored, every conversation overheard. She couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were always upon her, that she was never truly alone. The paranoia gnawed at her, eroding her sense of reality. She had become a prisoner in her own life, trapped by forces she couldn't comprehend. Then, one evening, as she walked home from the grocery store, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. A man across the street was watching her, his gaze fixed and unblinking. She quickened her pace, her heart racing, but the man didn't move. He just stood there, watching. She turned a corner, hoping to lose him, but when she glanced back, he was still there, following at a distance. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She was being hunted. The experiment hadn't ended, it had escalated. She was no longer just a subject, she was prey. Desperation set in. She couldn't trust anyone. Not Jacob, not Mark, not even Emily. Everyone had a role to play in this twisted game. She had to find a way out, a way to escape the web of lies that had ensnared her. But how could she fight an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere all at once? The answer came in the form of a cryptic message slipped under her door one night. "The key is in the code," it read. No signature, no explanation. Just those words. Sarah stared at the note, her mind racing. The code. The facial recognition software. The metadata. It was all connected. But how? She spent hours poring over the files, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, her mind a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts. And then, it clicked. Hidden within the lines of code was a sequence of numbers, a pattern she had missed before. It was a key, a backdoor into the system that had been tracking her every move. With trembling hands, she accessed the system, her heart pounding in her chest. What she found was more horrifying than she could have imagined. The experiment wasn't just about her. It was about everyone. The data collected from her had been used to profile thousands of individuals, to predict their behaviors, to manipulate their choices. She wasn't a subject, she was a template. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a conspiracy, it was a global operation, a massive surveillance program designed to control and influence the population on an unprecedented scale. And Sarah had unwittingly become the face of it all. She sat back, the weight of the revelation crashing down on her. There was no escaping it. She was in too deep. The only choice now was to expose the truth, to bring the entire operation to light. But doing so would make her a target, a marked woman in a world that was always watching. As she prepared to go public with the information, a final message arrived. It was from Jacob. "I'm sorry," it read. "I never wanted this for you." The message was a death sentence. She knew what it meant. They had found her. They were coming for her. The doorbell rang. And Sarah knew, with chilling certainty, that her life would never be the same again. The sound of the doorbell cut through Sarah's breath like a knife, steady and deliberate, as if whoever stood on the other side knew exactly what they were doing and exactly what it meant. She didn't move at first. Her eyes locked on the knob, her fingers clenched around the edge of the desk where her laptop still displayed the system she had just cracked into, the ghost architecture of the surveillance network that had consumed her life. She thought about running, about hiding, about disappearing, but that was pointless now. The truth was too big, too tangled. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about everyone who had ever been pulled unknowingly into the algorithm's trap. She had exposed it. And now, someone had come to make sure she never spoke of it again. But Sarah wasn't the same woman she had been weeks ago when she first tried to cancel that delivery. Fear was no longer the sharp weapon used against her, it had been dulled by the fire of betrayal, the ache of solitude, the weight of 1,000 manipulated choices. So she opened the door. Standing there wasn't some masked agent or shadowy figure, it was Emily. Alive. No bruises, no wounds, just Emily, looking older, more tired, but very much alive. For a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe. She didn't know whether to scream or cry or slam the door shut and pretend this was another illusion, another layer in the deception. But Emily stepped inside before Sarah could act and quietly closed the door behind her. "I didn't disappear," Emily said softly. "I was taken off the board. I broke protocol. I started to feel too much." Sarah's mind reeled. Emily hadn't been a victim, she'd been part of it. From the very beginning. She didn't scream. She didn't lash out. She just whispered, "Why?" Emily sat down, hands trembling, voice barely holding together. "We were recruited during grad school, data science majors, behavioral analytics, recruited by the same agency that contracted your firm. We were told it was about national security at first. Threat prediction. Then it became behavior steering. Then emotional conditioning. Then something else, something darker. You were supposed to be one of 100. A subject in a harmless simulation. But you were different." Sarah stayed silent, watching the tears form in Emily's eyes. They started isolating the data, your reactions, your stress tolerance, your instincts. They ran simulations with your behavioral template on thousands of users. You became the algorithm's foundation. And then the board saw potential, predictive consumer modeling, political manipulation, emotional influence at scale. They didn't want to study you. They wanted to turn you into a tool. And you went along with it, Sarah said flatly. "I didn't know what it would become. I thought I could protect you from the inside." Sarah opened her laptop and brought up the last encrypted file she hadn't touched yet. Inside was a full schematic of what the algorithm had been trained on, her decisions, her psychological breakdowns, her reactions to pressure, fear, hope, love. All of it translated into a predictive behavioral model now embedded into multiple commercial platforms, including major social media, retail, and even digital therapy apps. The conspiracy hadn't been to destroy her. It had been to replicate her. But there was one more thing. Sarah's mother's name, buried in the metadata of the original project file. She asked Emily, point blank, what it meant. Emily didn't answer at first. She just stared at the ground, her voice cracking when she finally said it. She was one of the first designers. She built the initial learning model, the seed framework that eventually became you. She wasn't just your mother. She was the architect of the system. That's why they chose you. Sarah stumbled back. Her mother had died in a car accident when she was 17. Or so she'd been told. But now she had to ask the unthinkable, had it even been an accident? The final moment of clarity came not from Emily's words, but from the video embedded deep within the folder, a backup recording labeled Prototype Response 0.0. The footage was grainy, old, time-stamped from over a decade ago. A woman, her mother, sat in a sterile testing room, speaking directly into the camera. If this model works, it will become self-generating. It will grow beyond its input. But it needs someone real, someone human enough to guide it. My daughter, she's the only one I trust. But if this is ever found, stop it. Don't let them use her. It was never about Sarah being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had always been at the center. Not just watched. Designed. Shaped. A living algorithm raised by the very person who tried to keep her human enough to break free. And now she had. But as she sat there, Emily staring at her in silence, the laptop screen flickered and then went black. The files began to erase themselves in real time. Sarah slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. A kill protocol had been activated. What did you do? She asked. Emily's face hardened. I saved you. But Sarah finally understood. The betrayal wasn't over. Emily hadn't come to help. She had come to clean up what was left. And then a second doorbell rang. Not the front door. The one in the back hallway, the one no one ever used. The light outside had shifted by the time Sarah opened the back hallway door, casting long shadows across the narrow corridor that led to the fire escape. She expected danger, expected to be met with a weapon, a black-suited figure, or another piece of the puzzle meant to confuse or corner her. But there was nothing. Just a manila envelope left at the threshold, no address, no markings, only her name written in handwriting she hadn't seen since she was a teenager. Her mother's. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, the weight of the past finally tangible, the final thread she hadn't realized was still loose. Emily remained behind her, silent, watching, her role as protector or manipulator now irrelevant. Whatever came next, it would come because of this. Inside the envelope was a single photograph and a thin flash drive. The photo was old, faded, and taken years before Sarah had even been born. It showed her mother standing next to a group of people outside what looked like a university lab, young faces, all hopeful, some smiling too wide, unaware of the storm they would someday unleash. One of the men standing beside her mother had a familiar face, Jacob's father. Her uncle. A quiet man who had died years ago, one she had barely known. They had all been part of it from the beginning. The experiment didn't start with Sarah, it began with their generation. The vision they had shared to create a predictive intelligence model capable of mapping the human psyche had spiraled out of control long before Sarah ever became a subject. She was never the beginning. She was the outcome. She slid the flash drive into her laptop, knowing full well that if it contained anything viral, any kind of final sabotage, there would be no coming back. But this time, the screen didn't flicker or die. Instead, it opened a single window with an audio message. Her mother's voice filled the room, calm and familiar, layered with exhaustion and sorrow. She explained everything, the intention behind the prototype, the horror she felt as she watched the project morph into something she no longer recognized, and the day she decided to disappear. Her death had been faked with the help of someone inside, a final act of rebellion to stop the momentum that had already gone too far. She had left pieces behind, embedded breadcrumbs in early source code and journal entries, hoping one day her daughter would be strong enough to uncover it all and free herself. Tears blurred Sarah's vision as she listened, not from pain or shock, but from the overwhelming sense of validation. She had always felt watched, but now she knew it wasn't just paranoia, it was programming. And now, for the first time, she could see the whole web. The layers weren't just surveillance and control. They were trauma, silence, and inheritance. Generations passing on secrets and experiments in place of love. Emily stayed quiet throughout the message, her presence a reminder that even the people closest to us can be shaped by systems so powerful they erase the line between choice and control. When the audio ended, there were no directions, no final twist, no calls to action, only her mother's last words. You are the only part of this that ever mattered. Not what they built. You. In the days that followed, Sarah made a choice. Not the kind the algorithm would have predicted, not the binary response they trained her for. She didn't go to the media, didn't attempt to burn it all down. She understood now that some truths were too large, too complex, to reduce into headlines or leaks. Instead, she quietly began dismantling the system from the inside. She used the access the project had unknowingly given her, backdoors, old credentials, ghost code her mother had written, to start erasing data. One test subject at a time. One prediction node after another. She couldn't kill the machine, but she could starve it. And then, one morning, she disappeared. Not in fear, but in defiance. No trace. No forwarding address. Just a disconnected number and an encrypted goodbye sent to the handful of people she had once trusted, including Jacob. She told him she didn't hate him, but he had to live with the world he helped create. That was punishment enough. Some say they still see her in surveillance glitches, brief moments where faces don't resolve properly, where names don't track. Others say she's in hiding, teaching others how to vanish from the data, how to live in the gaps of the algorithm. A few believe she's working with a resistance underground, spreading tools that corrupt tracking models and behavioral maps. No one really knows. And maybe that's the point. What started as a cancelled order became the unraveling of a digital myth built on the illusion of control. A woman unknowingly turned into a prototype became the architect of her own escape. And in the end, the system didn't break her. It revealed her. The most unpredictable variable they never accounted for. And now, somewhere out there, she's still rewriting the code. Quietly. Relentlessly. But if you're watching this, you have to ask yourself, was it really just her? Or are you already part of the next version? Because maybe, just maybe, the experiment never ended. Stay tuned, because the mystery is far from over. In the next chapter, Sarah's journey takes a dark turn, and the true nature of the forces at play is revealed. You won't want to miss what happens next.